11. The next morning, Hilda sat in the car watching the countryside scroll past. Sheep grazed, the river babbled, blue pine branches waved in the autumn breeze. There on the left was a steep hill that Hilda loved to roll down on her side. Here on the right was the biggest rowanberry bush in the whole valley, and a patch of long grass perfect for making grass trumpets. So many memories, so many things she would never do again. Far away to the east, a forest giant blundered among the trees. Hilda had never thought of a forest giant as small, but now she realized how tiny they were compared to last night's visitor. For the 100th time that day, she thought about the midnight giant. Why did it keep coming to the valley? What was it waiting for? Why did it look so sad? It was hard to think with Mom talking so much. She had hardly stopped chattering since they left the house an hour ago, going on and on about her own childhood in Trollberg and her weekend visits to her grandparents in the countryside. Perhaps we could do the same thing, Mom was saying as they drove over the bridge. Live in Trollberg most of the time and visit the countryside some weekends. What do you think, Hilda? Sounds great, said Hilda, except for the living in Trollberg part. The river, Bjorg, was still on their right, but it was wider now and slower. Up ahead, Hilda saw the towering twin peaks of Mount Har and Mount Haldor. Between the two mountains stood a high brick wall. You know why Trollberg has such tall city walls, don't you? Said Mom. To stop people escaping? No, Mom laughed. To keep them safe from the trolls. Trollberg was built smack bang in the middle of troll territory. I see, said Hilda. So what you're saying is that we humans kick the trolls out of their homeland, just like the elves are kicking us out of our house. It happened a long time ago. Mom sighed. Please don't be difficult today, Hilda. They drove beneath a gigantic arch with the words Welcome to Trollberg painted on it. Two bell towers stood either side of the arch, like prison watchtowers. Hilda guessed that the bell towers were meant to keep the trolls away from the city. She had seen for herself how much trolls hated the sound of bells. Hilda wound down the window and poked her head out to inspect the city. It was even grimmer than she remembered it, a town square full of wretched pigeons, a bare concrete schoolyard surrounded by a wire fence, and a maze of dirty streets lined with dirty houses. All right, we've seen the city, said Hilda. Can we go home now? No, said Mom. I have a whole list of places I want us to look at together, starting with the Edmund Alberg School. Don't look so gloomy, Hilda. You never know. You might like it there. They spent the whole day in Trollberg, trapezing to and fro and trudging up and down stairs to inspect miserable two-bedroom flats. The streets all looked the same to Hilda, and so did the houses, which stood squashed up next to each other in long rows, not at all like their home in the country, where level wilderness stretched far away to distant snow-capped mountains. Mom seemed different in the city, too. She swung her arms fast as she walked, and she kept looking at her watch. It was like she was turning into a Trollberg businesswoman right before Hilda's eyes. The absolute worst thing about Trollberg was the bells. It had been so long since Hilda last visited Trollberg that she had forgotten how many bell towers there were. Not just along the city walls, but all over the city. The frequent ringing and bonging and dinging and donging made Hilda jump in fright and clap her hands to her ears. And when she and Mom returned home in the car that night, her ears were still ringing. Please don't make us move, Mom, Hilda pleaded as they drove out into the countryside. It will be good for you, Hilda. You'll be able to make some friends at last. I have friends already. I'm talking about human friends. I don't want human friends, and I don't want to live in Trollberg. There's nothing to draw. There's nowhere to explore. The whole city smells of car fumes, and I didn't see a single rowanberry bush all day. Hilda, we don't have a choice. Yes, and the reason we don't have a choice is because you're not doing anything. Me, I've been out negotiating with mayors and dodging rabbits and smearing troll spit on my feet, trying my best to fix things with the elves. What have you been doing? Nothing. You know what I think, Mom? I think you want to move. I think you've been planning it for ages." "You're wrong, Hilda." Mom's voice shook with strong emotion. "And if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all." "Fine by me," snapped Hilda. They drove the rest of the way home in heavy silence, and did not speak to each other for the rest of the day. 12. That night, Hilda sat by the window with Twig, waiting for the midnight giant. She was not sure why she found its presence so comforting. Perhaps it was its immense size which somehow made her problems feel smaller, or perhaps it was the tears that shimmered in its eyes as if it understood her pain. She wished she could talk to it and ask for advice. At 5 minutes to midnight, a flicker of movement made her heart leap, but it was not the midnight giant. It was a flock of wolves migrating. Wolf migration was a common event in the Bjorg Valley. Every few days, long lines of wolves would come flying up the valley in search of wolf knows what, their big eyes peering into the darkness ahead of them and their tails flickering from side to side as they flew. Downstairs in the hall, the grandfather clock began to chime. 1, 2, 3. Hilda stared into the darkness. 4, 5, 6. Twig's ears pricked up and he started to paw the window pane. 7, 8, 9. Hilda fixed her eyes on the peak of Bobble Hat Mountain. 10, 11, 12. Perhaps the midnight giant was not going to come tonight. Hilda looked at Twig. He was standing on his hind legs, craning his neck as if trying to see behind the mountain. "What is it, boy?" she murmured, opening the window and leaning out. Then she saw it, a strange bulge on the mountainside, a bulge that looked for all the world like a giant's elbow sticking out. "It's over there," cried Hilda. "It's sitting behind Bobble Hat Mountain." "Right, I'm going to talk to it." She scrambled out onto the roof and made her way to the edge. The wind blew cold, making her gasp and shiver. "Hello," she cried, her voice echoing back to her off the mountainside. "I'm Hilda. What's your name?" Ever so slowly, the midnight giant got to its feet. Its head and shoulders loomed over the top of the mountain as before. It glanced at Hilda and let out a great sigh that made all the fir trees on the mountainside shudder. And then it turned to leave. "No, you don't," cried Hilda. "There's no way I'm letting you get away this time." She got up and started running along the roof towards the midnight giant, spreading her arms wide for better balance. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see the tail end of the wolf formation approaching. The very last wolf was about to fly past the edge of the roof. Hilda sped up to match the speed of the wolf, and then, without even thinking about what she was doing, she launched herself off the roof, through the air, and onto the wolf. The startled wolf went wild, soaring and bucking, snuffling and clucking. Hilda wrapped her legs under the belly of the beast and clung onto its neck for dear life, staring north towards the midnight giant. The midnight giant lumbered away with gigantic steps, making immense footprints like the one Hilda had seen in the meadow. The giant was fast, but Hilda's wolf was faster. It shot through the air like a pebble from an elf's slingshot, higher and higher into the clouds, closer and closer to the striding giant. Hilda whooped and held on tight. Thick clouds were all around her, but suddenly they parted, and Hilda saw the head of the midnight giant right below her. "Thanks for the ride, Wolfie," she shouted. 1, 2, 3, Geronimo! She dropped off the wolf and fell down, 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 onto the midnight giant's head. Its fur was thick and dark like scurvy grass, and it had a pleasant chalky smell. "Hi!" she cried. The giant kept moving. It seemed not to have heard. Hilda climbed down the side of the giant's head and found a cavernous ear-hole in amongst the dark fur. "Excuse me, sir," she called, wriggling into the ear-hole. The giant stopped walking. "Who are you?" it said, and its voice was like sad thunder. "I'm the girl from the house over there," gabbled Hilda. It's nice to meet you at last. I'm a big fan of yours. People must tell you this all the time, but you're so big. I've never seen anyone as big as you. You're humongous. Tell me, why do you keep coming here at midnight?" The giant was silent for a long time before answering. "I arranged to meet someone," it said at last. "Who?" asked Hilda, curious. "An old friend." "Are you sure you have the right place?" The giant turned its head to scan the landscape. Nestled on the ridge of the giant's inner ear, Hilda gazed out across the moonlit valley, the forests, the river, and the distant mountains she loved so much. "I remember the position of the stars," said the giant, "and the smell of thyme and rowan berries. The hills have shifted a little, and your house is new, but yes, this is the place." "So why has your friend not come?" "I don't know." The giant moved off again, stalking back toward Bobble Hat Mountain. "The meeting was arranged a long, long time ago. We said we would meet here at midnight. Maybe I got the date wrong." "You don't seem like the kind of person to forget an important date," said Hilda. "I'm sorry to say this, but I don't think your friend is coming." "Not coming." The Midnight Giant pondered Hilda's words. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps she's gone, just like the others." "She? Who is she? Tell me about her." The giant did not reply. It came to a stop next to Hilda's house and raised his hand to its ear. It lowered her down and let her slide off his finger onto the roof of her house. "Sorry," Hilda called. "I didn't mean to ask so many questions, but you seem so sad, and I've been feeling sad as well. And I just thought—" "Goodbye, little girl," said the giant. "Thank you for the chat." With that, it straightened up and trudged off into the night. "13. The next day, Hilda went with Trig to visit the woodman's house in the middle of the great forest. The house was a beautiful two-story cabin made of pine and walnut wood, built around the base of an enormous oak tree. As Hilda and Twig approached the cabin, they heard smooth jazz music from within. The woodman opened the door to Hilda's knock. His wooden face was not able to show much expression, but his eyes did get a little wider, and his mouth a little rounder. "How do you know where I live?" he said. "I've been exploring this valley my whole life," said Hilda. "Aren't you going to ask me in?" "No." Hilda shrugged. "I'll come in anyway." The inside of the woodman's house was beautiful. It had cream-white floorboards, a gleaming piano, and a cozy wood-burning stove. Every wall was lined with bookshelves. "Tea?" asked the woodman, offering Hilda a mug of soily water with sticks in it. "I'm afraid I've got no time for tea," said Hilda. "I need to borrow one of your books." "Do I look like a librarian?" said the woodman. Hilda sighed. "No, you don't. But I noticed the other day that you were reading a book about giants. I wondered if I could have a look at it." The woodman went to the corner of the room. He climbed the stepladder and started hunting for his book on giants. Twig jumped onto the piano. And pranced along its plinkety-plinkety-plonk, plonk, all the way down to the booming low notes. "Here it is," said the woodman. He pulled a hefty book off the top shelf and passed it down to Hilda. "Things with Big Feet: A Guide to Every Giant You've Ever Seen, as well as Some You Haven't, by Sigrid Renberg." "Perfect," said Hilda. She sat down in a basket chair and ran her fingers down the index of the book. "Forest giants, snow giants, horse giants. Ah, here we are, ancient giants." Hilda turned to the right page, pushed her hair behind her ear, and started to read. "When the world was young, ancient giants lived in the valley of the north. They were taller than mountains and could live for many thousand years. One giant always sat atop the tallest mountain. a long-forgotten peak in the frozen lands. He sat there gazing into the black, guarding the earth from anything that might threaten from above. Any young giant could be chosen as guardian, a duty that could last thousands of years. Hilda turned the page, and her eye fell on the picture of the midnight giant. "That's him!" she cried. "It says here that his name is Jorgen. It says he was the last of the ancient giants to serve as guardian." Hilda frowned as she continued to read. Everything changed when human beings appeared in the Valley of the North. They built towns, which the ancient giants would accidentally step on. This led to arguments and fights. When the ancient giants realized that the world had become too small for them, they upped and left. No one knows where they went. Some say they just jumped as high as they could and drifted off into space. "Poor Jorgen," cried Hilda. "The ancient giants all left without him. He's been sitting on some frozen mountaintop all on his own for thousands of years, keeping watch, and no one told him that everyone else was gone. His friend was supposed to meet him, but she's gone too. He's all on his own. Poor guy." The woodman looked at her with empty eyes. "Have you finished?" "Finished what?" "Reading, talking, being in my house." "Sure." Hilda closed book and stood up. "Thanks for showing me the book." "Woodman, come on, Twig. Last one home is a rotten wolf egg." An hour and a half later, Hilda barged in through the front door of her house and kicked off her red rubber boots. The house was toasty warm, and a divine aroma of ginger, nutmeg, and caraway seeds wafted over her. Only one thing was different. Mom was not at her desk, nor in the kitchen. Hilda went upstairs, followed by Twig. Mom was in Hilda's bedroom, pulling clothes out of the wardrobe and putting them in a suitcase. "What are you doing?" cried Hilda. "Packing." Mom dropped an armful of woolly jumpers into a suitcase. "I'm afraid another of those tiny letters arrived. Same message as usual, except this time it has the words 'Final Warning' stamped all over it in red ink." "We can't let them bully us," cried Hilda, stamping her feet. "Hey, I have an idea. We'll make the house into a castle. I'll dig a moat, and if they find a way in, I'll use the broom again like I did before." "I'm sorry, Hilda," Mom snapped the suitcase shut and plonked it down on the floor. "I'm packing up the house. We're moving to Trollberg tomorrow." Mom went downstairs, and Hilda slumped down at her desk with her head in her hands. Twig came and curled up at her feet. Her sketchbook lay in front of her on the desk, open at her map of the valley. She gazed down at Boot Mountain, Bobble Hat Mountain, the river, the great forest, and the blue pine forest. Places she had spent her childhood exploring. Places she might never see again. Hilda started to cry. Big, fat tears rolled down her cheeks and dropped onto the map. "Please don't cry," said a little voice. Hilda looked down at Twig, amazed. She didn't know he could talk. He had certainly never spoken before. "Over here," said the voice. Hilda wiped her eyes and saw Alfred, the elf, sitting on a pencil sharpener. "Oh, it's you," she said. Alfred grinned at her. "You thought the deer fox spoke, didn't you?" "Of course not," Hilda lied. "And for your information, this is my room, so I'll cry if I want to. You would cry too if you had to leave your home." "I'm just saying I don't like seeing you sad," Alfred mumbled. "Yes, you do," Hilda snapped. "Otherwise, you'd have told me where the king lives." "Hey, that's not fair." Alfred hopped off the pencil sharpener and walked toward her. "It's out of my hands. I signed the secrecy form. There's no way I can tell you the location of the king." "Whatever," Hilda muttered. "I can't say a word," said Alfred, stepping onto the map. "Leave me alone," said Hilda. "Go on, scram." "Not a single word," repeated Alfred. He was behaving very oddly, jumping up and down on Hilda's map. "I can't say anything at all. I refuse to speak. I am silent on the matter. Do you understand?" Hilda sat back and stared at the little elf, who seemed to have completely lost his mind, dancing up and down on the spot, pointing at his shoes. "Do you understand?" Alfred repeated. "Do you understand?" Hilda looked at the elf's shoes, which were tap dancing on the picture of Bobble Hat Mountain, right next to the picture of her house. A smile spread slowly across her face. I understand, she said, reaching for her warmest coat and scarf. Alfred, you dear little creature, how would you like to come for a walk with me? "14. Bobble Hat Mountain was right next to Hilda's house. She had explored it many times before, but only on the grassy slopes, never above the snow line. Beware of climbing above the snow line, Mom had always told her. It's dangerous. There are deep holes you can fall into. There are weather spirits, and worst of all, there is the risk of an avalanche. Hilda knew what an avalanche was, a huge wave of snow thundering down a mountainside, sweeping away everything in its path. The thought of it terrified her. But the thought of moving to Trollberg terrified her even more. With her adventuring satchel on her back, Twig by her side, and Alpha in her ear, she set off up the grassy slopes of Bobble Hat Mountain, determined to reach the Elf King's castle on the snowy mountain peak. As soon as they passed the snow line, the mountain got steeper and more difficult to climb. Hilda pulled her yellow scarf tight around her neck and picked up a birch branch to use as a walking stick. On every step, Hilda poked the stick into the snow in front of her to make sure there were no hidden holes. Snow crunched and squeaked beneath her feet. Twig followed in her footsteps, lowering his head into the wind. "Oh dear," said Alfred suddenly, "that weather spirit looks angry." "What weather spirit?" A flurry of snow descended on Hilda, covering her head and shoulders. "That weather spirit," said Alfred. Hilda looked up, and another flurry fell right into her eyes. There was a dark snow cloud directly above her head. To her left and right the weather was dry and sunny, but she and Alfred were trapped in their own personal blizzard. Twig darted to and fro, leaping into the air and snapping at the unruly spirit. "Spirit, stop it!" cried Hilda. "You're being very annoying." "Annoying, am I?" roared the weather spirit, dumping a massive load of snow that knocked Hilda to her knees. "I'll show you annoying." The snow piled up around Hilda. It was up to her thighs. It was up to her waist. It was up to her chest. It was up to her neck. "Make friends with it!" cried Elfer. "Your mom is always saying how good you are at making friends with magical creatures. Make friends with it quick, or it will bury us both." "Don't mind my elf," Hilda called to the weather spirit. "He doesn't like mountain climbing. He'd rather take an elevator." "I'm not your elf," Elfer muttered. The weather spirit chuckled. "My elf is a writer," yelled Hilda. "He learned the alphabet at school." "I'm not your elf," snapped Elfer. The weather spirit sniggered. It was still snowing, but more lightly now. "My elf has pockets of gold," shouted Hilda. "It's very wealthy." The weather spirit laughed again, and a slender ray of sunshine broke through the cloud. "Enough of the elf jokes," protested Helfer. "My elf loves baking," yelled Hilda, "but he can only make shortbread." "Tell me another," chortled the weather spirit. "No, don't," said Alfred. "Here's a good one," shouted Hilda. "How many elves does it take to change a light bulb?" "I don't know." 100, yelled Hilda. 1 to change the bulb, 9 to stand on each other's shoulders, and 90 to fill out the paperwork. The weather spirit roared with laughter. 90 to fill out the paperwork, it echoed. "That's really very good. I'm going to go and tell my friends." The spirit floated off as quickly as it had arrived. Twig lowered his antlers for Hilda to grab onto, and she heaved herself out of the snowdrift. "Why did they all have to be elf jokes?" huffed Alfred. "Sorry," said Hilda. "Those were the only ones that came to my mind." As she trudged upwards, Hilda could feel melting snow trickling down the back of her neck. She shivered with cold, and her legs felt tired and heavy. She stopped next to a silver birch tree and leaned against the trunk. "How much further is it?" she panted. I can't tell you where the king's castle is, said Ulfer, but changing the subject, I think this lovely walk will last another 4 hours. 4 hours? Hilda bent over and put her hands on her knees. I don't think I can walk for another 4 minutes. Just then she heard a strange snuffling sound above her head. She peered up into the silver birch tree and saw a line of yellow wolves sitting on a branch. They were snoring their heads off, regaining their energy before the next stage of their migration. Twig, Hilda whispered, I can't take you with me on this next part of the journey. I'll see you later. I'll try not to be too long. Hilda climbed the tree and edged along the wolf branch. The loyal deer fox blinked his intelligent black eyes and growled softly. Excuse me, Ulfer cleared his throat. As long as I'm sitting in your ear, the least you can do is share your plans with me. What exactly are you doing? This, said Hilda, reaching out and grabbing the nearest wolf by the scruff of its neck. The wolf woke up. Its big eyes bulged. It opened its mouth and gave a yelp of fright that echoed up and down the mountainside. Hold on tight, Ulfer, cried Hilda, and the wolf shot out of the tree, as if its tail was on fire. Hilda tugged gently on its fur to direct it up the mountainside. Up it went, faster and faster, past craggy rocks and mounds of snow. I feel wolf sick, Ulfer moaned. This is why you should never fly without a permit. We're nearly at the summit, yelled Hilda. Let me know when you spot the king's Ah! The wolf sped up and looped the loop. Hilda lost her balance and slid off its back. As she fell, she reached up and grabbed the wolf's tail with both hands, causing it to crash straight into a snowbank. Woof. Hilda lay on her back in the snow. She opened her eyes. I'm okay, she said. No, you're not, said Ulfer. Neither of us are. Huh? Hilda sat up. What do you mean? Listen, said Ulfer. Hilda listened. At first, she heard nothing, and then she detected a faint rumbling sound further up the mountain, getting louder and louder with every moment that passed. What's that? She said. That, said Ulfer, is what we elves refer to as an avalanche, though usually we say it more like this.